Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, I want to give you an exclusive update on Untermyer Park, the famous park, unfortunately known for such horrific satanic activities in the 1960s plus. We just don't know how long a lot of negativity has went on there and what was going on, but there's been horrible reports coming out of there which have been verified. And there's a reason for this, because this is a magnificent park. It's just fantastic. I recommend everybody go on the internet and check out their website, look at all this. It's really gorgeous. The problem is that Untermyer, who was a Jewish lawyer and the first lawyer to ever get $1 million, I don't know, settlement in a case or payment for himself, of course, has been dead for very many years. Now, $1 million back when he got it, and I'll see if I can look for some further information there, but it's really unimportant. Probably was equivalent to 100 million today. And he could keep this 150 acre park going. That's a huge amount of land. What people don't understand is that everybody thinks they want a giant house and they want everything that goes with it. Well, you know, the problem is you create your own little country that way. You've got to get people to do everything. Maintain the house, clean the pool. You're wealthy, you're going to go out and clean your own pool? I don't think so. You're going to mow your massive lawns? I don't think so. And all the things that go with it, including the fact that the Greystone Manor, which was on this property built by someone else, which I'll go into here briefly, had 99 rooms. Okay, you're really wealthy. Well, I'm going to clean the house today. So the whole idea is it costs a fortune, and to maintain gardeners, keep this place up, etc., is a very, very expensive task. That's why in many countries in Europe, you want a castle? You can have one. They're free. You have to maintain them, which is probably going to cost you many millions a year. So let's start off with exactly what this was about. Well, in 1865, John T. Waring, the owner of the largest hat factory in the United States, bought 33 acres of land from Bowmer Estate and had an architect, John Davis Hatch, build a turreted mansion in which Waring called Greystone, a name that remains on nearby Metro North Indian train station. In 1876, Waring had some financial reversals and moved to Boston. So he had this great hat factory, but he ran into some problems putting up his 99-room mansion. Wow. That's unbelievable kind of money is there, and of course earned off of the sweat and blood of virtually no paid workers. Of course, back then, everybody wore hats. I'm assuming that he ran into problems when hats started to go out of fashion, and not sure the actual reason there. But he ran into problems. He had this huge factory. So politician Samuel J. Tilden, a former governor of New York State and a failed presidential candidate, rented the mansion from Waring in 1879 and bought it and the estate soon after. So he rented this and then he bought the whole estate that was there. I'm assuming that Waring needed the money. Tilden had an interest in horticulture and built 13 greenhouses to grow ornamental plants as well as fruits and vegetables. So it really was Tilden who started this horticultural activity on this 33 acres that he bought from Waring. Tilden died at Greystone on October 4th, 1886. And Samuel Untermyer bought the 133-acre property by now. I'm assuming, I don't know if he added to whatever happened there. Probably did. At auction in 1899 from Tilden's estate. Isn't that interesting? So this was a property, of course, he died there, was auctioned off by his family. Untermyer, who was born in Virginia in 1858, moved to New York City as a boy, was a lawyer. He was a lawyer, a partner in the firm of Gustenheimer, Untermyer, and Marshall. He's noted for being the first lawyer in the U.S. to receive a fee of $1 million for a single case. A good investor, Untermyer became extremely wealthy. He also transitioned from practicing corporate law to taking cases which involved promoting the public welfare. So you can see that that he was extremely wealthy. He was smart. The usual and classical case of the smart, genius, educated Jewish attorney. $1 million back then. Unbelievable. I think it's at least $100 million today. So you can imagine what you can buy with $100 million. But you're talking about a time, right up into the 1980s, housing and so forth, even in pressurized places like Southern California, were going for $20,000, $30,000. Cars were selling for $5,000 to $6,000. I mean, this goes right up through the 70s and so forth. New cars. So you can imagine the kind of buying power. I mean, the kind of obscene increase in prices we've seen over the last 30, 40 years is just that, obscene, making the rich richer. Now, Untermyer is a kind of interesting guy, and he loved horticulture, which he said he inherited from his mother, who was a great gardener, and was an expert in some. And he wanted really to get into that. He said what he preferred to do in life was become the New York City Parks and Recreational Commissioner. I'm not sure why he didn't try and do that. Maybe he was blocked out. Untermyer wanted his estates to be a formal gardens, and his competitive nature wanted them to be better than John D. Rockefeller's, whose estate was not too far away. So in 1916, after buying additional property to the north, I guess that's where those extra acres, and the original estate expanded from those 33 acres to 150. He hired a couple of well-known trained architects. One was a Frenchman named Butex Arts, and trained architect and landscape designer William Wells Bosworth, who had contributed to the architecture of John D. Rockefeller's property. On and off for over 20 years to build the finest gardens in the world, so it was thought. So Untermyer said, well, I want to have the finest gardens. So it's certainly a fun, worthy pursuit to a degree. The problem is with gardens, I'm not sure what they do. It certainly is a place to hang out, but it costs a lot of money. So with the, I'm sorry, I misspoke there. It wasn't a Frenchman. Boswell was trained at the famous horticulturist design architecture school in France and spent an awful lot of time there. I'm going to go into that because I think it's kind of a little fascinating thing there. So Boswell was a Bosworth was a very special person, well-trained. He was hired by the wealthy. Obviously, John D. Rockefeller used him. He had this training. From a French school, he had American training, etc., etc. I'm not sure all that means anything in the bigger picture here. We're not centering on these individuals, and I don't think anybody really cares. So let's move on to the more important things. So that's the background. It's quite interesting. This Untermyer guy was quite a character, but how much he was involved in the planning of the gardens and what is put there, etc. A lot of people have said that there's all sorts of metaphysical and other things placed there. I haven't really seen that. There's some classic architecture that's remnant of the actual Bosworth's French training. It looks very French, as so many of our buildings do, our Capitol building, etc. These are all Greek type looking things that come from old style architecture. With the pillars and all this. It goes back to, if you look at ancient Greek or the Greek monuments even of today that have survived, there's this whole look with the pillars and the domes. And this can go, I'm not going to go into all that stuff, but this is a type of particular architecture which is, very classical in nature. And you see this in many places, pillars of, they give you this strength aspect as well. So, Untermyer died in 1940, had wished to give the gardens to the United States, to New York State, or failing that, to the city of Yonkers, where it is located today. But because of the great cost and upkeep of the gardens, which were not accompanied by an endowment, so he didn't give any money to do this, which is kind of interesting. I'm not sure where all his money went to, but he was going to give the property and thought that was enough. But I guess he figured, well, maybe the city should spend the money since you're getting these 150 acres, that you should invest in it. But, you know, those acres, in terms of the cost of them, start to not be very valuable when you got to spend millions of dollars a year in upkeep. So his bequest was refused by all three of these. Nobody wanted it. Finally, in 1946, 16 acres of land was accepted by the city of Yonkers and became a city public park. The mansion itself was eventually torn down. Oh, that's interesting. Why was that? 99-room mansion torn down? Well, again, there's maintenance involved. Old buildings are not what you think. They are dangerous. They are not built well. They have leaks. There's all sorts of problems in terms of maintaining and, of course, heating and everything that goes with it if somebody has to live in a place like that. So I'm not sure how well these were built. But of those 150 acres, and I'm not sure it happened to the rest, 16 acres were taken by the city of Yonkers. I'm assuming that's really all they could afford. Certainly is a feather in their cap, so to speak, to have such a beautiful place. But there's a price to that. And are the residents of Yonkers and whatever support they can get from state and federal agencies going to be able to maintain this? Because of inadequate funding, much of the property was not maintained. A number of the structures gradually fell into disrepair and parts of the sites became overgrown, reverting to woodlands. In 1970s, an effort was made to restore the garden by the Yonkers mayor, an architect, I'm not going to give you their names, who cares? The campaign was short-lived and the property deteriorated yet again. In the 1990s, community leaders tried to, and a company called Open Space Institute persuaded the mayor at that time to purchase more of the original estate's land and to help the Trust for Public Land, with the help of the Trust for Public Land, resulting in a 43-acre park, which is the park that is there right now. So there's 43 acres of this park, about a third of it. And apparently the land is sitting there. I don't know who owns it, what the situation is, but not including an endowment to maintain the place. I'm not sure what the thinking behind that, but at least it should have been a certain amount of help, stating that the rest should be picked up. But there's certainly lots of national parks that are funded by cities and everything else. The national parks funded by the government, and there's city parks, etc. All of these things I have my own personal opinions on, but if you want parks, you're going to have to pay for them, and it ain't cheap. I'm not a big fan of it. I think land should be going to people that need housing and other things. But certainly you can make beautiful housing and put them in parks, maybe. But that's another situation. Untermyer Park and Gardens was added to the National Registry of Historic Places in 1974. So that gives it a certain ranking, and I'm assuming certain federal funding. Very interesting. And we're going to get into the exclusive breakthrough that someone contacted me about Untermyer Park here in a few minutes. Since 2011, the Untermyer Gardens, a non-profit organization, this is how these things are done, and of course back then he should have set up things better, has been working on restoring the gardens in partnership with Yonkers Parks Department, and grants from, as usual, all money comes from either the state, who probably gets it from the feds, and so forth. People don't understand. From the New York State of $100,000 in 2005 and $65,000 in 2009, helped to finance the restoration and rehabilitation of the park. Not much money. The conservatory employs head gardener and 6 other full-time gardeners and receives advice from Wave Hills funding director of horticulture, whatever that means. Do they get money too? Are they getting that so it doesn't go to the property? The usual non-profits, like the head of the Red Cross that gets $1 million a year. So, seems to me it's a lot of wasted money there. They need gardeners, they need helpers there. But to think that almost 50 acres is maintained by 6 guys is kind of an absurdity. And of course, they've done a lot of different areas to it. It is certainly a very beautiful place, and it is something to go to and actually visit if you're in that area. You're going through it. It's not very far from New York City. Yonkers is kind of a suburb, and it's important to fully understand that if you want to kind of pop your way over there. So it's certainly beautiful. It's on the Hudson. It is quite a something to behold, just even on the pictures. It's stunning. So the design of it, and I guess we could look into this, which I'm not going to, but basically there isn't any metaphysical, anything unusual about these guards. It's typical classical architecture of that particular time done by Bosworth. Plain and simple. They claim it's Indo-Persian in many of its elements, which of course ultimately kind of combines with the Greeks. Everybody stole from each other, most things ending up in Greece, which took everything from the Egyptians. The Egyptians probably invented most of everything or got it from other people. So there are all these different things, and mostly it's remnants of the very Greek-looking, such as the Temple of the Sky, and other type column things, as I've just mentioned recently. All these columns and stuff are remnants of the Greeks. The Greeks took a lot of that from the Egyptians, and few people understand that ancient or Greece occupied Egypt, I believe, for hundreds of years. It could be 500 to 700 years that they were actually occupying Egypt, and where they got a huge amount of their information from, and then gave it their own unique spin. The word pyramid is not an Egyptian word, people. It's a Greek word. And that was what little pies looked like that were sold in Greece or something, cookies, whatever they may be. So they said, gee, that looks like that cookie pyramid. And all of the names of the gods, etc., are all Greek variations. They are not the original Egyptian. That's how things change. So we can go into that, which is very typical of that time. People went back to the great architectures of the past, and that was the Greeks. So that should actually look like the Temple of Love and the Rock and Stream Garden. Again, this was was divined by Genoveses or Italian stonemason. So all of these things, and of course, what do you think his influence was? The Roman Greco design. So to think that there's any occultism in here, other than looking back on the very popular Roman Greek mythology and their buildings, etc. You got to remember that the Romans and the Greeks pretty much built everything in Europe, and when they were finally chased out by the filthy barbarians, that mostly coming from Arabic and backgrounds, when they were chased out by then, all of Europe took a giant poo. So you need to understand a little bit of history as well. But so there's nothing that I can see that is overly occult here. If you want to say that Greek monuments are occult because they're not Christian, well, I think that's stretching it. So I don't see anything here. There isn't anything here that points towards any audaciously pagan belief systems, nor are there any statues that I'm aware of. There may be here or there. And if we don't know if any of these statues are original, apparently there's a Sphinx statue there. Was that original? The Temple of the Sky, as I mentioned, very Greek. I mean, they show some lion gargoyle type things. Those look very modern to me. The Overlook, of course, has columns. We just went over all that. So there's really nothing here that can actually point to any of that. Now, who was this? William W. Bosworth is an interesting character, the guy who helped design this. Again, he built the Massachusetts Institute of Technology campus, the original AT&T building. These are all amazing looking structures. Of course, he worked with the Rockefeller family on his estate. But what happened with him, since he worked with Rockefeller, which is quite interesting to show you the kind of person he was and how he was taken, Rockefeller led him to France in the 1920s, where he was put in charge of the restoration of the Palace of Versailles and Notre Dame. Well, isn't that interesting? So he spent an awful lot of time there. He was awarded the French Legion of Honor and the French Cross of the Commander of the Order of Arts, along with Jerry Lewis. And was elected into the Academy, the National Academy of Design, as associate member, became a full member in 1928. He was born in Marietta, Ohio, received an architectural training at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and of course he went to the French school. So to actually, spacing here, he spent a lot of time in actually, trying to find some detailed information here, but he spent a lot of his life over in France helping the French before and after the wars. He was so connected to France and everything else that he actually was building a house there to retire in, which is quite interesting. But, I was looking for any kind of references to anything that may show that he was involved in any type of, he was involved in nothing. And none of his architecture shows any kind of occult background. What it shows is basically an actual classical art that he was trained in, which is very typical of big architecture. If you're going to build giant buildings and you're going to build buildings for rich people, they want them to look like palaces, the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Romans, the Greeks, etc. They want that, I am the god or lord of the manor. They want a very ostentatious look to buildings, as we can see that. And anybody who's been to Washington, D.C. can see that kind of architecture, this Roman, Greco-type buildings, whatever they're called, and the different influences. There's nothing in his background. He was involved with and working on the restoration of many of the Palace of Versailles, Notre Dame. So these are big projects, and he continued this throughout his life, and he spent most of his life and actually was retiring. He retired there, and he actually died in, what is it saying? Paris, France, they're saying here, at the ripe old age of 97. So that's quite interesting that he actually was able to do that. So it's pretty fascinating when you start looking at all of these projects that he was involved in. So Untermyer Park was one of the little things he did to help design it for the quite wealthy Untermyer. And there's absolutely no trace to anything there. And from what I can see, there's nothing overtly magical or occult in anything that is in Untermyer Park. But of course, I'd have to go around and examine everything. You got to make sure that you understand the difference between classical structures that look like ancient Greco-Roman stuff and the statues of even their gods or other influences, to somehow saying that that's a cult. Well, it really isn't. I mean, there are lots of things referencing old god forms in the Vatican, etc., and that can be taken to have different meanings. Even if something is set up to a particular astrological god or something, doesn't necessarily mean that that has any overtly occult things. Untermyer was a Jewish attorney. And certainly we don't see anything Jewish in Untermyer Park that I'm familiar with. There are no Jewish symbols there. There doesn't seem to be a Jewish influence, which I find kind of interesting. He went with what most very obnoxiously wealthy people do. They go back to these obnoxious structures that the Greco-Romans built, which was influenced a lot by the Egyptians and even some Persian accents there. So there certainly doesn't seem to be anything to that. So let's move on to really what's going on. Now, I've examined some without spending a lot of time, and I'd have to go to Meyer Park and look at all the symbolism there. We've seen some symbols of many types there. And what does that mean? I mean, a lot of it is just graffiti, but what we're looking for is things that were left there by possibly by Satanists and others. And we don't know the date of these actual graffiti, because graffiti has been going on for thousands of years, really, and we don't know when these satanic symbols have been added. And now with a new TV movie with books and everything else, were these from the original times there? Well, we don't know, but let's take a look at some of these things. Satanists, being the typical boring, unimaginative people that they are, as all people following the dark path, they don't have a single original idea. You can't really point to anything that's been taken by very satanic cultures that isn't something they stole from somebody. The Nazis stole the swastika. There's nothing in anything coming from National Socialism that wasn't stolen from somebody else. They stole runes. They stole everything. Let's go on. And of course, these were stolen from the Indians and the swastika, etc. So what are we talking about here? When we have classical satanic symbols, well, there are classical symbols. And what they've done is they take a symbol, hey, Satan friend, let's take the cross and turn it upside down. We are geniuses. So this is the kind of stuff they do. So everything Satanism does, and the basics of Satanism in general, is the fact that they do everything in reverse. A classic black mass is a Catholic mass, and they do it in reverse. This is a way of reversing everything. So this is their little pinhead way of actually disgracing the mass, which actually is a way of honoring it. But there's no traditions to Satan. Satan doesn't have a tradition. Neither does the Temple of Set. The founder of the Temple of Set has admitted the fact that it is completely contrived. There is no system there. As there is no worship of Satan. Satan, which could be called so many different things. Well, there is no system. So they made everything up. And I'm not sure there's anything wrong with that. Looking for a system of anything is folly. Things tend to come down to geographical practices, even if you believe in the same thing. Christian churches around the world tend to use different ways of doing the actual Mass. So the whole idea is that when you get into all these other areas, then it goes down from, to countries, to states, to cities, to actual towns, and even individual practices. So there are some similarities, but this is the problem with seeking the perfect tradition that was done there, which I spent years looking for these things. It doesn't exist. So there are similarities. So what is actually the satanic symbols? Now, satanic symbols are very interesting to understand of what they do. So, as I said, the average one, there's several ones that are used. I'm not going to go through all of them here, but I mean, there are the famous ones. Obviously, the upside down cross, which means you're denying the divinity of Jesus. So, by using their symbol. Interesting. Of course, the other one is taking the pentagram, which was always a very positive, you could say, holy, even godly type image, forming meaning from anything from the 5 wounds of Christ, which, of course, was taken and used again. Certainly didn't originally go. The pentagram was a symbol for Venus and other things. And you can find it in a lot of churches, believe it or not, in its proper way, not upside down. So, when you spin it upside down, you're taking the negatives and the positive energies and making them negative. So, and I'm not going to go into the history of the pentagram either. It's complicated, and I'm not going to. You turn this into long things, and people generally are not interested. I will go into the pentagram as a symbol on another particularly lecture here. So you see it everywhere. It's even like the cross and bones, which pirates took over, or maybe was part of the tradition. But that came from the Knights Templar. And they, of course, once they were attacked by the church, they took their fleet out. And a lot of people think that they turned to piracy. And they used their symbol up there as well. Interesting little factoid. Again, put that in your little pocket to think about. So the whole idea is that symbols are interesting, they're distorted, and again, it's difficult unless it's being used en masse by everybody to say that that symbol means exactly that. So, crosses themselves go back within history. It's not necessarily, and the original Christian symbol was not a cross. That's new to the Christians. They used the fish symbol was the common one, and originally Christianity used the fish symbol, and you would greet other Christians with the symbol of the fish. This later became into a cross, and now this is what they use. So everything is transitional again, but you're talking about the cross really wasn't used for hundreds of years after the supposed death of the Christ myth. So the all of that is, again, gets very good. And that's why we can't look back and say, where did it derive from? What was the original meaning? Well, that may not be what's happening today. We have to look at, in modern society, you look at something and you say, what does this mean? Okay? So that's a very important interpretation of what's going on now, not some pseudo-intellectual mudhead who doesn't understand how things are being applied. So, when we talk about the pentagram, it's generally positive. So what happened is that was then reversed to use the negative energy. So instead of positive energy of something, you reverse it, and that's the negative or dark or primitive energy. So that's what Satanism does in general. You'll see a lot of upside down crosses that also have a question mark, of course, upside down on it, attached to the top of, or I should say the bottom of the cross, as well. This is another way of questioning. It's being very blunt by putting a question mark there, is that it's saying that I don't believe in the Christ myth. So those are the two things you see. There's a lot of other ones. There's the symbol for sulfur, which is often called brimstone, because this is associated with the devil and hell. This is another symbol that is commonly used and been used by different people on particularly rock and roll albums, etc. This is one of the symbols that the satanic group Rush used on their last album, who have really been confirmed as being satanic in their imagery, which I will go into as well. So all you have to do is a little bit of research. When you start using those symbols, and using owls, and using pentagrams on fire, and using a man pointing with his left arm, Satan, Satan, Satan. Let's get real here. So I will go into that as well. You have to know what you're talking about. You can't be some gardener and think you know what's going on. So the whole idea is that all of these can be proven. I'll go more into it. Now, those are your classical symbols. Now, a lot of times you'll see circles around things as well. This is a way of enclosing and holding that energy and so forth. You generally don't see a star. A star would not have a circle around it. So that's another thing that we'll talk about, which the imagery that was used in Rush album covers, and including the number 2112, which adds up to 6. So the whole idea is, and we'll talk about that, is getting into all that. But these are the kind of... Now, when you go through, this is what you see pretty much everywhere. And you're going to see the inverted pentagram, the pentagram turned upside down. You're going to see upside down crosses. You may see that little question mark added on the bottom of the cross. This is your classic symbols. Now, the recent symbols made by the Church of Satan by Anton LaVey, he took the other classic symbol, which has been highly distorted. Again, they steal everything. Is the Baphomet, which was brought out in one single book by a defrocked Catholic priest who talked about this and had a drawing of it. This is this half animal, half woman, but it's supposed to be a balance. It's very metaphysical, and it's not satanic nature in general. The original Baphomet on the forehead had a regular pentagram, a positive energy pentagram on the forehead, with hands pointing up and down, meaning good and bad, yin and yang. There's the kundalini energies there. It showed the primitive nature of mankind by having hoofed feet, which, all of these have been contrived by a very obnoxious religion called Christianity to try and demonize anything that's non-Christian. And they do this today. So they can take anything that isn't Christian and say it's demon, when it's just different. So is the sign of the Jews demonic? Well, they said that for many years, that the Jewish symbols were demonic because they weren't Christian. Well, and in their mind, anything that is not Christian technically is bad and evil. So I guess that fits into the philosophy of most people who believe in something in such a strong way that if you don't believe in what I believe, well, there's something wrong with you. And that means ultimately, where does that lead? Well, that leads to being evil. So it's not so surprising. So these are the symbols you see. So Anton LaVey took the Baphomet head and placed it in the pentagram, 2 stolen image. So the pentagram was stolen and inversed, and the Baphomet's head was stolen in place of it. But that was the great breakthrough for the Church of Satan. So creative, Anton. You couldn't get your Hollywood buddies to come up with something else? So creative. Let's go steal again. So it's so typical. And I see this with everything, and you go to all these people who are using symbols are doing that. So the Baphomet, and as I said, I've done a complete lecture on the Baphomet, which you should check out on my YouTube channel, explaining every aspect to it. I think it's a fascinating symbol, bringing together so many things. It is a kind of a sigil in itself. And of course, guess what? The Satanists have taken that and called it their god. But there's nothing satanic about the Baphomet whatsoever, and them just grabbing an image so they can use it from one book that did it. And there's that book in itself has been taken by bozos like Aleister Crowley, and they talk about so many other things. And the half man, half beast, and so forth is not really a new symbol either. Gargoyles have been a combination of this as well, which are considered to be positive protective entities, and so forth. So, to get into all this stuff and to say that this is a pure satanic symbol, it certainly is a pagan symbol, and that could then be by very religious people seen as satanic. But pagans weren't Satan worshippers. They were worshiping alternative religions. And most of these alternative ancient pagan religions, while having lots of negativity, and I don't think you could have went far with their belief systems ultimately, but also have some great practical aspects to it. The honoring of the land, having spirits of growth and prosperity, having figures that are strong and powerful and fight for what they want, instead of saying, turn the other cheek, Avy. I got another one too. This kind of pathetic image for a god form certainly doesn't breed anything of positivity. It's hard to believe that actually caught on at all, but there are reasons for this. The Roman Empire invented that to actually implant a weakness into the people they were trying to control. And it backfired on them, and it took over too much. And of course, you're talking about a human group of people who are brutal and evil. So if you go out and tell people be strong and beat your enemy, well, that certainly they're doing that already. And that's just going to make it worse. So without getting into too much detail there. But when you get into the images, so you got the Baphomet image, and there doesn't seem to be any of that over there either. You got to remember that Anton LaVey made up his symbol, which is a little bit difficult to draw. So you got to remember the guys using their spray cans or crayon spray, because they really should be. That's the kind of mentality most of these people have. So the whole idea, they're not going to be able to use these fine artistic elements, at least not in this area. There are some great graffiti art out there, obviously, but that's not what these people are doing. So they weren't going to put the Baphomet there, and I don't know if any of it is there. But we have seen pictures of the classical inverted pentagram and, of course, the upside-down cross, which about anybody who is breathing and can stand on 2 feet can make. So you see this in many places all over the place, and it is very common. This is their symbols, and they're easy to use. Now, there are other symbols. Now, we have to also, what don't they do? So this is what they normally put out there, and there are a series of other things that are Satan, words, numbers. There's the famous, what we've been going on. This is nothing new. This, using your, forming a eye hole with your thumb and, what's your fourth finger? Kind of forming an eye, and it kind of looks like an eye, and you put that up to the eye. Well, that's a satanic symbol because it shows 666. So the thumb and forefinger together forms the round part of the 6, and the other thing, and your fingers are 666. So we see this in all rock and roll all over the place, and this has been documented. I mean, it's irrefutable that people are doing this. The devil horn thing, which has been thought to mean, most people think that just means rock and roll, but it's a devil's horn. It's supposed to mean Satanism. And of course, people are probably using that 99% of the time as a symbol that means rock and roll. Man, I'm cool, dude. I take drugs and I don't bathe. I'm cool. I look like a guy with long hair and cut off sleeves on my shirt because I got no muscles, so I want to show I'm a weak nerd. So the whole idea is that these are profound, and it goes through the ritual. I mean, there's very interesting stuff on there, and I've watched them on YouTube. I watched them many times on these ceremonies of how they're changing over and how Madonna and other people. Well, I think this stuff is irrefutable. To say that these kind of elaborate events, which can be analyzed as a big ritual, and that you're able to do that is shocking. You couldn't do that anywhere else. I mean, you didn't do that in ancient stage shows where they had the Rockettes of 100 of them kicking their legs up. Well, they're forming the leg up means the 666. Well, I mean, the point is that I guess you could say this kind of nonsense, but the eye thing is irrefutable. It's a sign of Satan. So, and most of these people are anti-church because the church never helped them. It's like the problem we're having with what are generally good beliefs by more liberal people, but they're never acted upon. They never do anything to help you. So people are now rejecting a failed, particularly in the United States, a failed Democratic Party because they never really did anything. But nobody does anything anyway. So now people are rejecting that. And this is why Christianity is being rejected, because they haven't done anything. There's been churches in this country that hundreds of millions of people go to that have done nothing in their entire history and continue to do nothing. They don't help the communities. They're not standing out to help the poor people. They're not helping with the homeless in general. Now, there are different parts and different churches that try and help in these areas, but it's really not significant enough to do anything. They're not really doing it. Going and giving somebody a blanket on a street doesn't solve the problem. And maybe it should start like that, but that should give you thought to say, well, what can we do where I don't have to give blankets out? Feeding people on Thanksgiving and Christmas is not enough meals. I don't know about you, but I eat more than twice a year. So the whole idea is this is the kind of nonsense. These are throwaway people and nobody cares about them. And since it's a difficult problem, well, we'll ignore it. So these are the type of things that go on. So getting back to symbolism, I mean, there's a whole group of symbols out there that are being used. And of course, as I said, they've taken the Baphomet out of one occult book done by the Frenchman Epis Levi, I believe was his name. Well, of course, that's a magical name. Anybody who has any brain doesn't use their slave birth name. So the whole that was it, and he wrote several books, and they caught on at the time, and they're still around, some of that stuff. You can easily get his book. He talks about it. As he said, he was a defrocked priest. He was screwing everything he could move. He was doing all those other things. He was thrown out of the church, and I guess you really had to be bad to be thrown out of the church, particularly in those days. But he to talk about this entity. Now, the Baphomet also tends to look like some ancient pagan, particularly Celtic gods, where they put animals together. But this is nothing new. The Egyptians did it, and there's nothing bad about it. We live off these animals. We live off the earth. We should praise and protect them. So we then have separated ourselves so much from that. But that's a whole nother story. But you don't see those symbols very often, because Baphomet is a complicated thing to actually obviously draw. Now, there's lots of these that you can buy. You can wear Baphomet pins. You can all this stuff. They're made up by the thousands of people who use this. The inverted pentagram is everywhere. I've seen people wear shirts of these, and the most notorious case originally now here is with the Rust accidental shooting on the Rust movie set by Alex Baldwin. The armorer there, that little punk 24-year-old girl who went on TikTok showing off her assets for money. I guess she was unable to do sit-ups, though, because she's got a belly like a Buddha. Wore one of her many pictures that she posted. She is wearing, on several of them, an inverted pentagram shirt. I'm not sure what the details of it were or not, but a lot of them say Satan and everything else on it. So, I mean, it's not really a slide image. I mean, they're announcing it. I've seen this also on so many other places where people now wear these pentagram shirts because they're fashionable, because rock bands did it. Well, this is pretty sick, and you got to know what you're wearing. So if everybody liked the swastika and started wearing that everywhere, I don't think people would be that acceptance of it. And I don't think we should be acceptance of an entity that's there to cause misery and suffering. Except for the pseudo-intellectual, he's a symbol of all good. Yeah? Well, what planet are you from? Just like Lucifer. Another misunderstanding of the light bringer, which has absolutely nothing to do with bringing light. That's not the original translation. That is a perversion of it. It was one who brings light with him because he was thrown out of heaven like a meteor. And when you look in the sky, you see light because he was thrown out of heaven along with his rest of his scum buckets who were kicked to the curb and beaten quite easily by St. Michael and others. Archangel Michael. That's the real mythology, people. So the whole idea is when we get into all these things, we need to understand that of what's going on. So those are their symbols generally. There's lots of other ones. As I said, the fingers, the looking through the eye, the demon horns. And again, everybody falls into the fact that these things are just popular now. And that's the whole idea. The whole idea is to make this middle of the road and know when to be upset about it. It's offensive to put something negative and evil on a t-shirt saying, oh, I'm just doing this. What do you mean fun? You're into negative and evil and hurting? What is that all about? I also don't like people putting their particular religious symbols on there. I don't necessarily want to see your cross or whatever other symbol you have. Keep it to yourself, because you're there to hurt people. You're not there to help. So I have no use for any religions. They all really come from the crotch of the world. They all come from the same place, and they're all evil. Ultimately, as far as I'm concerned, they mask themselves. But we also know that there's a line. And if you're going to call yourself a Satanist, well, that's what you are propagating that. And the horrible crimes committed under that name should be eradicated, just like things like Nazism, Imperial Japan, and a lot of other traditions that people were using and have used to symbolize mass murder, torture, and everything else. It's not a joke, people. We forget these things, then we make them into symbols that we wear or put on something, ignoring the original value of them, thus making them pop nonsense. And it infiltrates your consciousness and makes you into a boob. So let's get back to the actual breakthrough here. Now, I was contacted by someone, of course, who listened to my actual YouTube and talking about Untermyer Park and the positive activities that went on there after the Satanists are finally kicked out. And why they weren't kicked out initially, this goes back to the same old corruption, the problem with the lack of law enforcement. I mean, these aren't things that you can't handle. They have the money and time to hassle prostitutes, pot smokers, and everybody else, and undercover agents that can get into all sorts of areas, but they can't take care of that when we have chopped up dogs, people were arrested occasionally in different areas with child pornography and other things, and who were directly linked to a murderer who goes out and shoots people in the street. Yeah, but a guy over there, he's got 2 packs of cigarettes he brought across the border without taxes. Yeah. He also is pretty safe to beat up and arrest. So it's the same old story there. And of course, while they like to harass Johns and other people that use the services of prostitutes, it's amazing we have that word in our vocabulary. They don't do nothing about the pimps. The pimp's got the money, and the money goes in the envelope that goes to the police. Yeah, that's how it works out there, people. So the whole idea is nonsense. You could go in there and take over that park and put it in proper aspects from day one. Yeah, there shouldn't be allowed in a park to have graffiti of any type. Certainly graffiti that is of a dangerous nature. But all graffiti is a dangerous nature as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to see positive stuff there either. I don't want to see your name, and I don't want to see the date or anything else. That should be removed, and that should be part of what you do. Now, graffiti removal and everything else is costly, but it can be done. Any graffiti in a park like this on the structures that are there. So, but let's get back to the graffiti there. Now, I noticed here and talked about this in another lecture, and it was that talk led somebody to contact me saying that they were a group of other positive Christians and occultists who actually went into Untermyer Park and countered the satanic symbols with Christian symbols. You get that, people? Now, Satanists do not ever use crosses that are not upside down. They do not do that. They generally don't do anything in white unless it is necessity for the background. Generally, everything is always done in black because it's black, dark, and evil. They don't do anything in white. Now, one of the photographed images that were actually upside down crosses that were shown in one of the buildings, and why they're still there, I don't know. And I'm not sure that this goes back to the Son of Sam either, because this person told me that they've been countering these in a very deliberate manner for many years, and a lot of these are recent. You got to remember that the Son of Sam goes back to the 70s, and I don't know if it even spilled into the 80s. You're talking about over 40 years ago. So this is all part of understanding what you're studying. Now, if you're going to study satanic cults or follow them, you're going to have to understand their practices. So by doing such, you're going to find out a lot of very important information. Wandering about, listening to other stooges that know nothing is going to get you into problems. So know your subject matter, especially if this is key to any kind of investigation. So the bottom line, as I saw in this particular thing, is that there was a white circle, which means enclosing the energy connected to a white cross. The Christians did this. So did some positive, quote, Wiccan witchcraft groups did this, closing or holding the satanic energy in with the white circle and the cross. Oh, this is too much for the stooges that are out there screaming they know so much about this case. This is very important because it's really not the Son of Sam case. It's really what we're talking about here is organized satanic criminals which have prospered for God knows how long when they originally started. They certainly didn't start in the 60s. They became strong and obnoxious in the 60s, but they are alive and well today, and they're stronger than ever within all of society. So this is relatively frightening. We went through the 80s where we had all these problems with these Satanists in the McMartin preschool, which has been a proven case. The problem is that, interesting enough, all the authorities and news media decided to counter it. Isn't that interesting? Why did they counter it? There was the preponderance of evidence, proved everything, and it was ignored because of payoffs and corruption. But the evidence is there. And it's pretty sad that these scumbuckets got away with it, and there are hundreds of children in those areas who still to this day are well aware of the fact that they were ritually abused. Now, they wanted to blame so many things, and it does get to be very complicated in terms of it. But they're saying that the actual investigators did this. Well, I don't know if they're not. And the problem is that these are very over the top to the highest extreme of things for a child to say. Now, the problem is that children live in a world of talking Ninja Turtles, Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, who wear clothes and talk. They watch a bunch of people do strange things like superheroes. I mean, we keep children in a fantasy world, which now has went on past that into adulthood because people don't want to deal with real society. So there has been cases which have been demonstrated that because children are not going to give you a real answer, they're going to give you a Ninja Turtle answer. So when they've had a guy go in the back of the room and sit there, and they've asked them, did you see that guy that came in? I think he's a troublemaker. Yeah, he beat up my friend over here. He pulled a knife on this. This is the kind of stuff they say because this is the kind of reality that they've taught people to do. It's seeing endless amounts of violence and all the other things. So the problem is children are not too good at that stuff. But this is very extreme of the stories, and they do add up, taking down tunnels and other things they laughed at. Well, they found these tunnels. They found giant tunnels dug next to the school that were filled in. The dirt was different than the dirt that is in that lot, and it was filled in. So it was brought in dirt, filled dirt that was put in there, and so forth. They have found the houses that the McMartins had in the mountains of California, and a few hours from the beach where the McMartin school was, and they had pentagrams all over it. Demonic symbols as well. And it goes on with all these cases, and it's irrefutable. We see now recently there's been several satanic murders by people who are thinking they're going to get benefits by killing people in blood sacrifices, which satanic literature talks about all the time. They allude to it. It's not, not meant to be taken literally. Well, it is taken literally, and you have to be careful, especially if they're modern documents. If you're looking at ancient grimoires, well, a certain amount of that is understandable that they're going to have practices that are not something we're expected to do today. So, that just is common sense. But if it's written in modern times in a modern book, well, it alludes to it, even if it doesn't directly state it. So all of this has to be taken into consideration, and we've had several satanic murders recently linked to E.A. Kenneding. And what's really, at least this was part of the teachings this person looked at. He looked at a lot of satanic teachings. And there's other people who have killed in the name of Satan. It goes on and on and on. There's the Hillside Strangler, who was a devotee of Satan. And most people that do all sorts of things are Satanists one way or another. And even if they don't use that, they're talking about really satanic energy. So all of this is very, very important to understand when you're studying this kind of case. So these groups went in there. They circled several of these upside down crosses and put a white cross there. Anytime you see white, Satanists do not use regular crosses. Why would they? What are you stating there? And why would you put a regular white cross next to your upside down black Satanist cross? Yet, none of this was looked at because they're looking at something they don't understand. And they're even too stupid to, hey, that don't look right to me, Bill. Why would you put white and black? Why is one cross one way and the other? I don't get it. I just don't get it. Well, the bottom line is that you get it when you know how symbolism and how practices work. Now, I've mentioned this before. It's like the peace sign. Now, the peace sign is basically the rune of death, or it is made to the rune of death. The peace sign is actually the rune of protection. When reversed means death. And what did they do with the peace sign? They put a circle around it, meaning they're stopping death. So when you put a circle around a upside down cross in white with a cross, a regular proper cross connected to it, you're stopping that satanic energy. They also carved in numerous trees all over the park crosses. There's also all sorts of Christian energetic things buried in the ground and hidden in many other areas there. So certainly it's nice to see people respond to such an evil energy so they can turn the energies of that magnificent park back into something that is beautiful the way it was meant to be. And it's good that people take actions like this. people are too ignorant to know that. So if you're not a person who has studied these symbols or knows anything about it, or maybe you read a book on witchcraft, well, you're not going to learn that from these things. Satanism is a unique area of reverse Christianity. It's really not occultism at all. It has nothing to do with witchcraft or magic. They have stolen those elements, and a traditional black mass is a Catholic mass done in reverse. They even get the flocked priests to actually do masses and so forth. So you're always using the negative and the bad, and that's how it works. So that's really what's going on there as of today. I don't know if people are sneaking back in there, putting more satanic symbols in there or not. I have actually no idea of what's going on there. And of course, I'd have to inspect it myself, because you really can't find any qualified people out there. I mean, they just don't know. You know, one of the problems with the regular researchers like Maurice Terry was the fact is this guy went to a Catholic high school and a Catholic college. He basically was just kind of a writer. He worked for IBM for a short period of time. I can't really find anything on him that really tells me how he survived. But he's looking at witchcraft books to figure out Satanism is not going to work. There's only minor elements you're going to find there because they're copying the practices of others, because that's what they do. So we all have to always understand this, that they are copiers. They copy everything. And if they continue to copy everything, it confuses stuff, and that may be part of the game. But there is no original thought in any type of satanic practices. It's just the way it is. They're all copied. They're ultimately going back to Judeo-Christian forms of ritual magic that are now calling upon what are considered demonic energies. And of course, there are demons in ancient Judeo-Christian systems, and there are sigils for them, and you call this in. These are all in the Bible, and the Old Testament and Jewish texts are loaded with demons and sigils and so forth of negative entities. So, but they don't generally use those to that much an extent. They may, depending if you're involved in what's considered demonic practices, which is different than Satanism is a very particular entity. Then there's demons, which there are so many of them that it's unbelievable. There are books filled with these that list them and their, quote, what they do, what they don't do, etc. Many of these are considered the fallen angels and have been contrived that they helped mankind. But that's a whole other story I don't want to get into here. But there are numerous positive energy Christian symbols and others that have been hidden, placed, and buried in Untermyer Park. And these are done by a group of positive occultists and Christians who have taken back the energy of that park and are going to continue to do this and watch for any type of developments. The reason why they did not take the upside down crosses and scratch them out or cover over them is because they wanted to present the image of that we are controlling you as the actual satanic energy that's there by encircling it and giving the power of God or Jesus over Satan, which is stated and has been proven in the Bible. So you either believe it or not, and that's their dominion over evil. That's why they have not marked them out or destroyed them. And they have carved into many trees there. There are many stones and other things that have these symbols on the underside and have been placed as well. So this is the information I've got. I've been able to confirm this by several photographs that are publicly available of crosses, very Christian crosses, by the way, not just some symbol. They were deliberately taking time to use particular type of Christian crosses that are carved into trees. And of course, a circle around a upside down cross in white connecting to a proper cross. I mean, it's like a stop sign. You know what that means? Stop sign? I think we all know. It's as clear as day if you understand symbols, and this certainly is the case here. So I hope you enjoyed that. This is another fascinating outlook. But, you know, my interest in this whole Son of Sam case isn't David Berkowitz. who's a strange, bizarre person in general. Who cares about him and what he ultimately did? Now, there's the tragedy of those people who are involved in it, but it's murky. You're never going to find the truth to any of that. It's a highly corrupt situation. The records have been destroyed. You're never going to find anything. Eyewitness reports or what people saw, think happened to them 40 years ago is worthless. You're not going to get anything out of it. Now, what should be investigated is what are the satanic cults operating in New York State at this time? What groups are there? What are they doing? Because these are the people that may have some information of what was going on back then. These things are passed on. This is their history. This is what motivates them. See, we did this, man. We took over this park. We killed dogs. This is the type of thing you're going to find in covens, evil covens there. Again, they've stolen that term. That will be passed on. And it's amazing how there is a huge core of evil energies throughout the eastern states there. New York, Massachusetts, and probably in all the other states up there of people that are involved in very evil magical practices. And of course, it goes all over. Some of the largest satanic groups are in, of course, the South and Texas and other places where they get a following. Temple of Set and a lot of negative groups have been out of Texas for a long time. Of course, Austin, Texas, which supports all the nut jobs, including all the evil people. So the whole idea is that this is not unusual, but certainly there was an extremely hot bed up in that particular area surrounding those neighborhoods. It has not disappeared. It just has went somewhere else, or now it is underground. People are more careful thanks to the 1980s, which brought all this to the public, which they're trying to now back away from to cover up their own tracks. But that surge really put these people underground. Now, where are they? Where are they practicing? Well, as with any kind of groups, they're certainly there and people know about them. I can tell you right now, but of course the investigators that are doing this will never ever hear about those. They're certainly there, but they're not going to tell you that. You have to look and be involved in is one of the places where Satanism is doing the same practices are many street gangs that run this country and particularly run all of the Northeast. The street gangs, criminal street gangs, are very violent, all are into this. They now have empowered themselves, since most of these street gangs are now Latin in nature, have taken their Santeriaic practices and put those into dark Santeria practices, I should say, and they're now using that in there. And there was many of these cults which are been found out and operating, particularly in California, and there's been books on it. And they used to murder workers down in different factories there. Women would disappear on a regular basis. I'm assuming this is still going on. But you have huge cults there that are operating, that are Latino-based. Now, like with everything, the mafia came over here and decided they were going to be Christians? Catholic mafia? Well, how bizarre. But, that's the warped thing. But they weren't setting up churches, even though they probably gave money to churches, nor were they using Christian symbology. But the bottom line is that's not what because of the combined nature of Santeria, which took over all the Christian names that they named the old African gods, there's this combining, and they are into all this. This is their religion. They go to brujos who protect them from the law, who give them all sorts of lucky charms. It's part of their culture. That's the way it is. So it's just they've been doing this for hundreds of years, and it's still what happens in all of these Latino communities, which are very metaphysically based. So they go to church on Sunday and they go to the bruja after church. This is how a lot of these things work. And this is a real fact out there. And to ignore this, you ignore it at your own peril. But there needs to be a great research into this and to find out what these people are doing. But this is alive and well. These groups are still operating, and they've turned into a huge organized crime street gang group who are all connected together in one way or another. It appears that the more sophisticated groups like the mafia and other people are working with these street gangs. I'm not sure this is any news to anybody. It's talk that the mafia used to hire the Hells Angels to kill people because the Hells Angels are so good at it, supposedly. So all of these things, why wouldn't one criminal group know the other and use each other's services for a certain degree as long as you stayed out of each other's territories? So this is going on, and to think that violent Latino street gangs wouldn't be using satanic, which is basically a lot of their practices using the dark or evil gods out of Santeria. What is it, La Morta? They all pray to this god of death and everything else. That's part of what these people are involved in. And why would that be strange? You think you become atheistic when you become a criminal? I don't think so. You just use the bad criminals. So if you want to be in the classical tradition, you call yourself Satan. You're Satanist, and you look for Satan to protect you. And if you're less that, or the Satan or evil energies of Santeria is another god. La Morta, isn't it? La Morta, whatever the figure is. Exactly. So you use this. And, of course, this is also done in a lot of the, quote, voodoo traditions. You don't hear much of that happening in any black gangs or other things, but I'm sure it probably does. And the Baron, the god of the graveyards, well, it can be very positive image, but if you're going to be a negative person, you're going to use the death aspect of that to help you empower. And all of these have a great death aspect. We live in a reality of death, and people are constantly trying to kill others in one way or another. So understanding the symbols that go with it, understanding all of the different factors of it, how are they operating today? I mean, this is what fascinates me personally. What happened in the 1970s is not really important to me whatsoever. All of that has moved on, but that is a root of these particular groups. Where does that root now attach to? Who is involved with it? Who are the people practicing all this? And we already know from this case, which makes it interesting to some degree, is that the rich and famous were connected, and they had lots of money to pay people off. And when you get too close in this case, apparently, even this case, that's over 40 years old, it's a dangerous situation, and these files are kept. Nobody wants past corrupt people to be discovered, because then that will mean that there will be a corruption investigation. That investigation will bring down all the people of today. Does everyone get that? Well, if you don't, you should. So this is not new. This whole aspect of this, the use of this motivating factor, this use of evil energies everybody wants to be empowered and wants to be guided, even in the most depraved practices. The fact that this entire society, even after the great upheaval of the 80s and showing these horrible things, which they then mostly backtracked on, even from what I understand, Geraldo Rivera said that he apologized for putting on all those traumatic people, because these were all supposed to be nuts that didn't experience this. This is pretty sad. Very, very sad. This empowered everything. Now it's a laughing stock. You got people that you tell somebody this person is a Satanist. Why is it raining now? Oh, no, I said the guys say, oh, well, who cares? That's how the whole thing is. The point is that once you get involved, like so many groups, and they suck you in, then you start seeing the type of debauchery going on, the murder, torture, etc. There are serious, serious problems here, and now it's just accepted. As I've mentioned with on the armorer for the Rust movie, who's has court problems now. Well, she's a good example too, wearing a satanic shirt. She did very sloppy work that got somebody killed. She should wear that shirt to court to show that not only am I stupid, I think Satan's wonderful. So this is the kind of thing you run into. So this is not as harmless as people think it is. So we need to understand that there are elements like this that need to be handled. So This is going on en masse. It's been going on for many, many years, and these people grow stronger and stronger because there's virtually no prosecution of any of these people whatsoever. You don't even see that much anymore unless it's so blatant, like what recently happened in England, where this guy stabbed 2 women in the park to death, doing it in a ritual for Satan, which would make him win the lottery. Now, these people aren't wrapped too well, but they have enough money, time, and formalized energy to buy a knife, make the pact, and carry it through. And there have been several other ones who've done this as well. And God knows how many of this actually goes on there that is overlooked by the people involved in these cases. So it's just overlooked. Maybe they feel ridiculed. Maybe it's something like extraterrestrials. If you're an airline pilot and you say you see a ship out there, they ground you and you're fired. So nobody talks about it. But I've never met an airline pilot who didn't see something out there on numerous occasions. But they're not going to talk about it generally, and particularly not going to report it, because they're going to be persecuted for those beliefs to a very high level. Some who have reported these things have been grounded for the rest of their lives. So they were unable to continue to fly. So these are all the things we have to look at and seriously look at them and find out, well, what is going on here? What is the actual bigger picture here, and what is going to be done about it? So, and it comes to Untermyer Park, you now understand what the park was all about, how it fell into disrepair. There's still a lot of money that has to be put in to maintain parks like this, and when things fall into such horrible states, they attract a lot of bad element of people. There's places to hide. There's nobody coming there. These turn into places where you can do anything you want, and you're never going to run into a problem. This is then furthered by ignorance of people and by the horrible investigators who know absolutely nothing about these situations and the horrible cover-up and corruption involved with it. Until next time.